Hello YouTube, this is the Asian Theist here, back to responding to an atheist we haven't seen a response to for a while, which is none other than the Atheist Voiced, aka Hemant Meta. In this video, we will be responding to another video that has clearly gotten a lot more attention and praise than it really deserves. And I will be doing what little I can to hopefully undo some of the damage. Let's get started!
If God knows everything we're going to do in the future, then we don't have free will. But we do.
Knowing something and actively manipulating events are not the same things. For instance, if a helicopter pilot was watching a car and a train on a collision course for one another without any signs of stopping, a crash would be inevitable from the pilot's point of view. However, that hardly means that the helicopter pilot was somehow to blame for the crash.
If God doesn't know everything we're going to do in the future, then he's not really omniscient.
Well, thank God he is omniscient.
God couldn't stop a murder when there were only 4 people on Earth.
Ignoring the fact that there were probably more than 4 people on Earth, it's not that he couldn't stop it, it's that he didn't stop it. As to why he didn't stop it is a problem of evil thing which I have already made a video on.
If we're supposed to be God's special creatures, then the universe is full of a lot of wasted space.
And what would you define as wasted space? Furthermore, if God created a smaller universe, say, would that satisfy you, or would you be roasting him for being mediocre and having no artistic vision? Make up your mind.
Myth of a great flood and a virgin birth were around long before Jesus came around. Maybe those are just elements of an interesting story.
Even if that were true, there is no evidence, as far as I know, that proves that the authors of the Bible took those stories and stuck it on the Bible. If there was, you have failed to present it.
Virgins can't get pregnant. Not without modern medicine, anyway.
If there's an omnipotent God involved, I think there's room for at least one exception.
Michelle Bachmann and Sarah Palin? Christian. Barney Frank? Not a Christian.
Isn't that guilt by association?
God seems to agree with you about everything. Isn't that a coincidence?
There were plenty of times where I thought God agreed with me, only to realize how wrong I was later.
And isn't it also a coincidence that God seems to agree with all those Christians who also disagree with you?
What seems isn't always what is. That's why we have scholars and academics.
If you ever wrote a book with that many contradictions in it, your publishers would have to pull it from the shelves.
I fail to see how that applies to me. If he's talking about the Bible, then Hitchens' razor. What can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Now, before you start commenting below on all the various contradictions, please take a few moments of your time to check out the links in the description, which should address the majority, if not all, of said contradictions.
If God made us in his image, why do we have vestigial body parts and organs that often fail?
Perhaps it might be for reasons outside of the functional value of said parts and organs. I've made a previous vid some time back that deals with this in more detail. Link in the description.
99.9% of all the species God ever supposedly created are extinct. How many do-overs does God need?
Who said anything about a do-over? Perhaps God just created a constantly changing world where things that were once taken for granted could be easily swept away.
God doesn't exist because I said so. What, you don't like that reason? Because that's the same reason a lot of parents and pastors give to children to convince them God does exist.
I will not deny that there are problems with religious households and churches that will certainly have to be addressed in the future, but that hardly affects whether God exists or not.
The Holocaust.
Problem of evil, been there, done that, link in the description.
The proof people give for why God exists is so often based on their personal experiences. God spoke to them. They feel God. They just know God exists. It's the sort of proof we would never take seriously if it were applied anywhere else.
This might surprise you, but I don't take that as proof either, and neither does any Christian apologist I take seriously.
Too many of God's followers, using Bible verses to support their beliefs, have made life worse for other people.
In the words of former atheist Antony Flew, the excesses and atrocities of organized religion have no bearing whatsoever on the existence of God, just as the threat of nuclear proliferation has no bearing on the question of whether E equals MC squared.
No matter what Ray Comfort says, God didn't create bananas to look like this. They evolved this way without God's help.
That would kind of be the point. If God had to constantly intervene in every part of nature, that's not exactly a functioning universe.
Every time science and religion go head to head, science wins.
Depends on the religion. Doesn't sound like mine, though.
You don't need God to be a good person. Just cut out the middleman.
Correction, you don't need to believe in God to be a good person. However, you still live in God's world, regardless of whether you believe it or not.
People have been saying Jesus is coming back during their lifetime for many, many, many lifetimes.
How is that my concern?
He's not coming back. It's time to move on.
Maybe not in my lifetime or the next few 100,000 years, but that hardly means he is never ever coming back, especially when you consider that he never gave a precise date.
God works in mysterious ways is typically a euphemism for stop asking hard questions.
Not always. If we're dealing with a God who existed before the universe, it's not unreasonable for him to act in ways that are beyond our current understanding.
Between tornadoes in Oklahoma, droughts in Texas, and hurricanes in Alabama, there sure are a lot of natural disasters in the places that God supposedly loves.
Really? You mean to tell me that believers have to go through adversity like everyone else? That's super mind-blowing, man.
You were made in God's image. Except for your foreskin, apparently. You need to cut that off.
Context, please. I think this was referring to the creation of the mind rather than a physical body. Does God have toenails, for instance? Well, that's just about it. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to help the channel grow. And tap the bell icon to be notified immediately when the next video is out. In the meantime, this is the Asian Theist, signing off.